Welcome to my teaching learning session. We continue with BPCC 131 and today we'll continue with Unit 4. As talking about general psychology and talking about being the foundation of psychology, memory becomes the biggest foundation of psychology. As we've already discussed in the last unit, what was memory? Memory is about taking information in and then storing it for your usage and equally retrieving it at the right point of time. Memory has always been, metaphorized with a computer. Why? Because today AI is an outproduct of psychology which is coming from the thought of the memory. The reason that we can use our memory, store it and retrieve, so is computer doing its work where we are processing information, storing it and retrieving it on the name of the kind of disk or the kind of file that we store it. So memory and CPUs can always be taken as metaphors. Now, talking about the unit 4, we are going to discuss one of the most important theories, which is the levels of processing theory. This theory refutes the claim of Atkinson and Shiffrin. So, Atkinson and Shiffrin was one of the biggest theory of memory that we have had, which talks about the three-stage model. Three-stage model will talk about the fact that we have three kinds of memory: sensory, short-term, and long-term, which was discussed earlier. And that thought of Atkinson and Shiffrin is completely refuted by the levels of processing. Atkinson and Shiffrin mention of the fact that there are stages. And speaking of stages, we have memories that comes in the forms of stages, which was not agreed by the levels of processing. So why was that so? Why it was stating that Atkinson Shiffrin model being one of the most defined, being one of the most utilized model was refuted by the levels of processing. According to this model, the information that is encoded is processed at different levels. The manner in which information is first encountered and rehearsed leads to depth of processing, which suggests that the way you encode information, the way you take in information, will dictate the pattern of you keeping that information for whatever long. So, according to Atkinson and Shiffrin, every information will go from sensory memory to short-term memory to long-term memory. But according to this, they mention that our processing happens at different level. So whatever level of processing that you do would be the kind of, processing, with the kind of retrieval, the kind of storage that will take place. This was given by Lockhart and Craig in 1972 proposed, and he also mentioned the different levels of processing, which is what were the ways that it was being processed. So according to the elaborate rehearsal leads to far more deeper processing, maintenance layer to far more shallow processing, according to these processing. That suggests, according to Lockhart and Craig, if people will do elaborate rehearsals, what is elaborate rehearsals? Word meaning, understanding, rote learning, explanation of a theory by pattern to pattern, understanding the theory thoroughly, that will lead to deeper processing. That's really stands for true. When you have a theory that you've learned, understood with example, exemplification, you tend to understand it better, and you also tend to remember it better because you've memorized it, not in terms of just accepting the content the way it is, but also learning the explanation and then explaining the content. So that is far more deeper. So such deeper processing will lead to better, retrievals. So this was because of elaborate rehearsal. The other kind of rehearsals that we have, which is called the maintenance rehearsal, leads to shallow processing. Shallow processing talks about the fact that there are maintaining, in terms of maintaining is repeating the same thing again and again. I think we can execute, translate it in terms of rote learning. Maintenance rehearsal is a kind of rote learning, which is where you end up, maintaining something, moving something to shallow processing. Like, I'll give you an example. You make a child learn a poem without any exemplification, without any explanation, and the child just recites the poem and just mugs it out in front of you. That is rote learning. That rote learning is far more shallow processing because the child does not understand the meaning. They don't know what is it all about. There is no explanation. So that is called the shallow processing. So maintain and rehearsal will give you a shallow processing which can be forgotten far more earlier than the elaborate rehearsals. Also, Crick and Telving in 1972 proposed three others LOP. That means there were other levels of processing which was given by Crick and Telving further after this in 1975. So 1972 level of processing by Crick and Lockhart was extended, and then later Tulving and Crick actually extended this theory in 1975 and gave three different ways that how processing actually happens in different levels. The first is a physical and the structural level. So, physical and structural level would be information on the basis of its physical attributes. What does it look like? How many letters are there? So, remember, it looks like a bigger term. It looks like a longish definition. So, this is the physical attribute. Let's take an example. You're explaining a child to learn what's a cat. The child will like, okay, cat, it's a three-letter word. It's a very small letter. So it's a physical attribute. It's a very shallow processing. We tend to learn nothing over here. Then we have something which is called a phonological process, something which is encoded on the basis of how it sounds. Like cat might rhyme with hat, might rhyme with mat. So remember the phonological. So child learns to say it's cat, cat. Now the child with the phonological term will also try to understand the spelling. It's a medium level. Remember, it's better than the shallow level. It is still a shallow processing, but not far more shallow. Then we come to the most deepest processing that we have, which is called the semantic processing. Semantic processing is understanding the meaning, showing the child what a cat looks like. It has furs. It can be domesticated also. What does it do? The kind of noise the cat gives out. So these are something which is actually giving a proper meaning to that term. That's called the semantic processing. So encoding based on meaning and concept is far more deeper. So these were the three different extensions which was given by Craig and Talvin, which was physical structure, phonological processing, and the last is the deepest processing, which is semantic processing. This completes the the rejection which was put in by levels of processing to Atkinson-Shiffrin model, which was a three-stage model that we have. Let's understand also by the image. The images you usually beautifully explain us the concept. So shallow processing is structural emphasis on the structure. It's the word in capital letter, small letter, three letter. Intermediate processing was the second one, which is the phonological one, where you hear the term, you try to pronounce it, rhyme it, which is what does it rhyme with, what does it sound like, is it a heavy word? Then it's the deepest processing. Deepest is emphasizing the meaning of the verbal input, which is he met a cat on the street. So it's an animal. So that's how you can use it in a terminology. You can use it later after you have processed it. That's the deepest processing. Remember, shallow processing will not allow you to use the word in sentences. Now let's move to the integrated model of memory, which is the working memory. Now, when we talk about the working memory, it's an integrative model. Why do we call it the integrative model? Because it's the most functional part of your memory, which is called the short-term memory. I'll remove the image at the moment. Let's understand the context. Let's understand the text first. So, what is an integrative model and why do we call it? We call it an integrative model because of the fact that it's the working memory. The short-term memory is actually the storehouse. It's the functional storehouse which stores a lot of things, functions a lot. Remember, you disable the short term memory. I feel the long term will not work. So it's like sensory, short term, long term. Imagine if you remove the short term, how does your sensory information move from your sensory to long term? If you remove the short term, will the sensory information jump to the long term information? It's very difficult. Short term is the bridge between the two. So remember, short-term memory is the storehouse, but a lot of people later discouraged short-term memory, stated that it's a very passive storehouse, it does not do much. But later, Badley and Hitch supported the concept that it's just not the passive storehouse, it has a lot of work. Remember, it has limited capacity. What is the short-term characteristic? It has limited capacity. It has a storage of 7 plus minus 2, and also at the same time it's responsible for manipulation, complex learning, also reasoning, decision making, problem solving, comprehension. Very cognitively high based tasks are done by something which is your working memory. Yes, it is limited in capacity. It does not hold anything more than 30 seconds if you don't attend to, and it has a capacity of 7 plus minus 2, hence called as a working memory. Let's move to the image. Now, the reason that Badley and Hitch incorporated that it's a new kind of memory, it's the working model, and it's not something which is a passive storehouse. A lot of people stated that short-term memory is a passive storehouse. It's of no use. It just takes in information for 30 seconds, 7 plus minus 2. If items are 7 or 9, it will be accepted, else it's not. No. It does far more, technicality of a content of a text of something once it goes to the short-term memory. How? Let's see it. When we are talking about the short-term memory, the information gets in. Remember, it functions on three levels. The first is the visuospatial sketch pad. Then we have a phonological loop, and then we have the central executive, which is the episodic buffer. That means any information that comes in first will be how does it sound like? Where all can you use it? Like, let's take an example. You talk about the term called comprehensive. You understand how is comprehensive stated? Comprehensive. You understand comprehensive. Then there's a visual sketch pad, which is comprehensive, dividing the word into two, the right pronunciation. It is a longish word. Then central executive is getting the visual and the phonological concept together, understanding the meaning and using it in your experiences. Where did you use it before? Was comprehension used before or not? So that's called the episodic buffer. Remember, the working memory have three kind of work. Uses the word on visual sketchpad, makes the sense out of it in terms of sound. There's a central executive, and there's something which moves. Once it's understood, seen in your experience in the episodic buffer, it is seen in your long-term memory. Let's move to the types of memory now. See, memory is a greater pattern. We always feel that memory is a very small concept in psychology. Memory is never a small concept. I always have this idea, whatever that you learn is somewhere where in your memory. So anything that is learned is actually residing in some kind of any information, any bit of thing that you've learned on day 1, day 10. In some form of memory, it is intact there. In some form of memory, it's residing there. So that's called something in terms of the different types of memory. Let's understand. Does all the information gets into our mind in one kind of memory? No. There are several brackets that we have. We have semantic memory, we have sensory memory, we have episodic, autobiographical, we have false memory, and we have something called the flashbulb memory also. Sorry. Now, let's start with the first one, which is called the semantic memory. This is the kind of knowledge of the world. It's the general knowledge kind of a memory, a knowledge which is associated to your culture, sports, nature. Like the seven wonders of the world would be something which is going to be a semantic memory. This kind of memory tends to encode, store, organize, and retrieve information. So this is the worldly vices of your world, which is who's the prime minister, where do you stay, how number of states in our country, the color of our flag, the seven, as I said, the wonders of the world. So this is the knowledge about culture, history, sports, music. Also at times something which are facts also are considered here. Then we have something called the sensory memory. Sensory memory is also called the fleeting memory. The reason it's called fleeting memory because it's very small and it just impinges us and moves away. So it's like just for half a second that it stays with us, and it has a very low capacity, hardly a capacity of half a second, but it holds quite a many information. It can hold thousands of information. Capacity is large, but the duration is very less. That's why it's called the fleeting memory. Closely related to perception. Why? Anything that impinges on your sense organs from 5 and 6 organs, 5 sense organs and one special organ that we spoke about, which was vestibular and kinesthetic, is recorded by this kind of method. It's recorded for a very brief time. Remember, it's just a fraction of a second. Also to remember, the capacity is very large, but it's fleeting in terms of its duration. Then we have something which is called the episodic memory. Speaking of the episodic memory, the memories that are stored with respect to time, which you've lived, which has happened to you, which you've been a part of, you've enjoyed together. Remember, that's called something as episodic memory. Also to mention, episodic memory could be experiences that you have and you've held for a longer period of time, and something that's been with you for a longish time is also called something which is the episodic memory. Experiences lived, experiences of yours, experiences that you've seen, experiences that you've had in your life. Any kind of experiences that you've lived is called episodic memory. Then we come to something which is autobiographical. Autobiographical memories are one of those memories which are a part of the past event and personal experiences. And they are autobiographical because they're generally very accurate of what has happened at what point of life in your time. Like the time that you were born, the year that you were born, the time that you start walking. These are facts about your life. experiential facts that doesn't change, which has a record of time, place, and situation. These are called autobiographical memory. Then there's something called the false memory, a very new kind of memory that we should study. This is defined as a mental experience that is mistakenly taken as a vertical representation of an event from one's past event. It is stated that also known as recovered memory of pseudo memory, memories that are vivid, has emotionally charged. So, why it's called a false memory? Because this is something, a mental experience that is mistakenly taken as a representation of an event of a personal past life. Like, let's take an example. Gone for a movie and enjoyed that movie, and that has happened like 5 years back. So while you sit back for another movie, you might share this experience that, when I went for a movie that point of time, this is what happened with me. Remember, you associate movie conduction as a very personal connect to you, which could be also pseudo. Also, every time, maybe that movie had given you a lot of emotional revelation, a lot of emotional feeling. Remember, every time this feeling will come in, there's going to be a little add-on, a little emotional charging, which is an add-on. It is not something that you felt long back, but it's add-on right now. So let's take an example. Your friend lied to you and you had a fight with them. This has happened like years back, and you explain this to a new friend of yours. Remember, there's going to be an add-on of emotion. I felt horrible, I felt terrible. Remember, you tell this to from person second, you tell this to person 3 and 4. Now you're explaining this to a third person or a fourth person. Remember, it's going to be far more emotional charging. You might say, I felt terrible, I felt horrible. By the time that experience goes to the fifth person, you might say, this is the worst time of my life. That's why, this memory is called the pseudo memory, because the kind of emotion, the kind of vividness that you add every time that you remember is kind of not true. It's something that you've added on as a personal part to you. So that's why it's called the false memory. Then we have something which is called the flashbulb memory. This was given by Rouge Brown and James Kulik in 1977. They mentioned these are memories that are very accurate and just strike you as a flash, like a bulb, like hits you like a bulb. Let's take an example. Walking down the street and you just get a remnants of the fact, okay, I bought something here the last time that I came and I have it in my bag. You take that out and you see, this is what I bought from you. This is like a flash that comes to you, very vivid, very accurate. Also, it's not inaccurate. Remember, this is not something which is mistaken, anything which is added on. No, nothing like that. You've not added anything to this. This is very accurate, like a flash bulb, for a fraction of seconds and goes away. That's all. So that's something. These are different types that we have: semantic, sensory, episodic, autobiographical, false bulb, and something which was the false memory. That completes with us 6 kind of different types that we have. Let's move to some other types that we have, which is declarative and non-declarative. Declaratives are those kind of memory which involves effort and intention. These involve a lot of. These are usually factual information, very similar to semantic. Semantic is general knowledge. This is factual information, a mathematical equation of a plus b a square b plus b square plus 2abc. That's an algebraic condition. Remember, it's factual. Utilized for education, requires effort to be called out. So it's consciously controlled. You usually take it out when it's required. Then there's non-declarative memory, which are called explicit memories. Memories that you don't have an awareness of right now, and it unconsciously, without any intention and effort, comes to you, affects you, and it just comes to you. So these are some non-declarative and implicit memory, kind of memory which we have no awareness right now. Remember, it is unaffected by aging. Whereas the other kinds of memory requires a conscious effort. Declarative memory will be impacted by age. Remember, non-declarative memory is not impacted by age, because these are information that just strikes us without intention and without effort. So there are 3 following forms of the non-declarative memory, which is implicit, which is primary, conditioning, motor, and procedural. Let's start with primary. Primary is something which is works unconsciously, helps in speeding up the process of retrieval. It also suggests that memory can be activated unconsciously. Also, conditioning we've already done. Learning conditioning can be a classical conditioning, can be instrumental conditioning. You can be rewarded to remember something, so it's like being rewarded to recall something. Then there's motor and procedural. This is also kind of memory that you do not, it just happens to you. Like, let's take an example. You've learned driving in the beginning. Learn to drive in the beginning is something which is consciously happening. You're sitting on the steering, you moving, you're putting, pressing the brake, moving the clutch, reversing it, and putting some race. That's all consciously that you're doing. Once you've learned it for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, remember, it just happens unconsciously to you. That's procedural. Learn something in steps and procedure, then this becomes an automated part of you and becomes a part of you, learned in the forms of procedure. Could be cycling, could be guitar learning, it could be driving. Obviously, driving is one of the foremost, I feel, that we can include under motor or procedure. Motor, why? Because it involves the movement of your muscles, processing of your muscle, learning through your muscles. That completes this. Let's understand another concept that we have, which is so important in memory, which is considered as forgetting. Anything which is memorized, I don't say it's bound to be forgotten, but yes, forgetting tends to happen of such information. So, forgetting was greatly researched by Hermann Ebbinghaus. Hermann Ebbinghaus is also called the father and the main researcher of something which was memory, and also mentioned as one of the most important psychologists in the content of memory and forgetting. So, what is forgetting? Forgetting is the inability to recall already encoded information or stored information in your memory system. Anything which is stored cannot be retrieved. Anything which has been processed cannot be retrieved is called the memory system. Then, who was the psychologist whom started this concept of forgetting? As mentioned, it was Hermann Ebbinghaus. He was a German psychologist, and the first conducted systematic experiment by Hermann Ebbinghaus was 1879. Goes back long back. So he created some consonant, vowels, consonant, nonsense syllables such as NAK, PUC, K. I'm just letting you know that how does the nonsense syllable work. It is a consonant, vowel, consonant. So a vowel should come in, and he conducted a research where people were given these 10 such nonsense syllables to learn in two sets of rows. So there was two lists, list A and list B, which was given, and it was found that how did any kind of forgetting take place in the two kinds of listing that we have. So this was something that we talk about in terms of Hermann Ebbinghaus did an experiment using the nonsense syllable words list, and did an experiment in 1879. There are some main theories of forgetting that tells us how forgetting takes place. So this theory tells us that what is leading to forgetting. Is forgetting something which is happening organically? Yes, it can happen organically. Any biological reasons can also cause us forgetting. We always keep this at bay that biological procedures cannot cause forgetting. It can evidently cause forgetting. Any sort of organic stuff, accident, head injuries can also lead to forgetting. And apart that, there are other ways also that tells us that forgetting does take place. So remember, anything which is encoded, anything that is processed is not going to stay in your long term forever. It does stay there for some people, but some people have 50% of forgetting. Some people might have 20% of forgetting, and some people might have an 80% of forgetting. Again, individual differences. So let's understand what are the reasons how forgetting takes place. The first theory that talks about is the theory of interference. Interference is what? Interfering. Forgetting occurs because of interference of information. Now let's understand the two kinds of interference, which is called the proactive. Pro means forward, which is in front. So when we talk about forward and in front, remember, forgetting of newly acquired information due to interference of previously learned. So remember, you're forgetting the new information. The forward information is getting forgotten. Why? Because you have something at the back. Like you have, let's take an example. You're learning French and you've already learned German. Remember, the learning of German might interfere in your learning of French, the new information. So here the interference, forgetting of newly acquired information happens due to the interference of previously learned information. That is something which is proactive interference. Then we come to something which was retro active interference. Retro means old. Now let's take an example. Retro is backward, it's not the forward. So that means you're forgetting what kind of information? You're forgetting the retro information, which is the old information. Now the old information is getting forgotten because of learning of new. And I feel this is something which is very common to all of us. Doesn't this happen? You've given your first duty examination, you tend to forget that content, you come to half yearly, learn new things. So this, this is the kind of information I feel we all go through. Let's take an example. You've given an exam. You've given your bachelor's exam of some code. You tend to forget it after the exam is given. That's called something which is retroactive, because you tend to learn now new information the second course type you will learn. So that's called the retroactive. Retroactive is very common in children because we tend to forget the older information. We are taking a lot of new information. A lot of new information is coming in our memory systems. Now let's understand this curve. This curve was given by Hermann Ebbinghaus, a very famous curve. This tells you when does the maximum amount of forgetting takes place. Let's take an example. We've learned a topic, we've learned a context, and we have that learning with us for a while. Now, how much will it take to be forgotten? It is stated maximum amount of forgetting. You know, large amount of forgetting usually takes place in the first 2 days, and later, remember, by the seventh day, you can imagine 40% of forgetting, you go through the curve, 40% of forgetting will happen by the second day. 60% of forgetting also happens something, you see it's by the first day. By the seventh day, if people have to forget, 100% of forgetting will take place. So retention goes down as the number of days goes down, according to Hermann Ebbinghaus. Hermann Ebbinghaus also mentioned the first 8 hours of learning is far more important. Your maximum forgetting takes place in the first 8 hours. And a lot of researchers have mentioned that once you go to sleep after learning, it tends to take more forgetting. So once you go to sleep after learning, it will lead to more forgetting than any kind of retention. And a lot of people say that staying awake for a longer duration after learning can lead to forgetting. So that is something which was again a lot of researches on forgetting that we have of. Let's talk about the other theories of forgetting that will tell us how are we forgetting things. So first was the theory of interference that we had. Now let's come to the trace decay theory. It proposes that your learning material, the material that you have learned, can cause changes in the central nervous system and leading to formation of memory traces, which was also called as engrams in 1958 by Brown. They mention, I feel this is scientifically true. Let's take an example. You learn an information about we're learning memory today. This understanding of how do you forget, how do you learn better, what can lead to learning better, what can lead to forgetting more, will make changes in your learning system. The way you see things, the way you interact, the way you process things now, the levels of processing will change. So they mention as you learn new information, that causes some changes in your central nervous system. So that causes some changes in your central nervous system, which will some memory traces will be formed. According to Brown, in 1958, this was quoted. When these memory traces, so whatever that you've learned today, remember it's been unused for a matter of like 5 days, 5 months, remember that tends to fade away. So that engrams that have been made, those changes that you've made as learning tends to change and tends to be fade away. Once that tends to fade away, that's called decaying of information. It's not now anymore that is trace decay. Now traces of information are going. You're not rehearsing it, you're not using it. So that's called the trace decay theory of forgetting. I feel this is a kind of theory that we all experience. We all go through the trace decay theory. The reason for the same is that trace decay tells about the information that is actually going in right now. Whatever that you've learned right now is making changes in your central nervous system, and some kind of engrams or some kind of memory traces are being formed. Remember, you keep that memory trace. You have learned it right now. You have given an exam of this memory trace, but now this is no use. This information just goes away in terms of you probably don't use it in your grad's first year, second year, third year. Remember, we will not remember it by the last year of our graduation. So that's something which is trace decay, another very common theory that we are talking about. Then the other is cue dependent forgetting. Cue dependent forgetting is something that happens like this to everybody, like a blink of an eye, I feel. It's such a simple way of forgetting, and smallest of information can be remembered and can be forgotten by this kind of forgetting. So according to this theory, forgetting can also occur because of the absence of an appropriate or the presence of a cue. It can be absence of an appropriate cue. You're looking forward to some hint which is missing, and at times it could be because the hint is so poorly designed, it's so poor, it's not clear, it can lead to forgetting. Also, studies have suggested that if participants were given a hint or cue about the category of those items, that improved their recall. And studies have also showed that physical attributes of the environment also play a very important role in learning. So let's take an example. When you're sitting and giving an exam, and you probably giving your exam in the same class where you started learning. Let's take an example. You have a science psychology exam, a general psychology exam, and you're learning the concept of conditioning. You have learned the concept of conditioning in the same class where you're giving the examination. Remember, the environment, the class becomes the cue for you. The class just adds on and becomes a part of it. So you feel that, okay, when I was sitting here in this class, I was learning this kind of conditioning. The operant was learned here and the classical was learned. So even the environment becomes a very positive cue for you, and it helps in a very positive role of retrieval. So that completes with something which is cue dependent forgetting. Again, something that happens in the blink of an eye, and small little cues, hints, information, items that can help you, learn, retrieve things as quickly as possible. And at times, if you're sitting in a blank room, sitting in a room that gives you poor hints, remember your retrieval can be zero. Your retrieval can go down to a greater level. Now let's move to the last kind of forgetting that we have, which is called the encoding failure. Encoding failure happens to all of us in day to day living. When we are not able to listen properly to an information that is being given, when we are not able to learn the information given to us properly because it was explained and we could not understand, you have not encoded it well. Encoding is the reception of information correctly. When you do not receive information correctly, you don't encode it. So once you do not encode it correctly, remember, you don't take it beyond. You're unable to process it. I feel a lot of times children in class do not perform well is also because of the fact whatever that was taught in the class was not attended to properly. And once it was not attended to properly, it was not even understood properly. So when it was not attended and understood properly, remember what will happen? What kind of retrieval happen? Confusion. The child might remember one word from one paragraph, another word from one paragraph, because the child did not encode it well. The information did not go beyond the sensory memory. The child just knows, yes, I just learned this topic. I've heard of this term, audition and visual, but the child will not remember, did I semantically process it? Did I understand it? So there is failure in processing information to memory. Remember, encoding failure is one of the reasons why people forget most things, because they don't learn it well, they don't understand it well. Like while you're playing a game and the instructions are being given at the first time, so they tell you that this is what you need to do. Remember, if you do not hear the instructions well, or the instructions are not clear, you did not encode well, maximum forgetting, you will not be able to play that event or that activity well. So these are the four kinds of theories of forgetting that tells us these are the even reasons behind forgetting. These can also be the causes of forgetting. How? The causes of forgetting can be in a way, it could be uh, it could be in a way that it could lead to, let's just revise everything. Theories of forgetting and causes of forgetting. Interference, two kinds. Proactive is the forward, you forget the new things because of the old one. Retroactive is when you forget the old ones because of the new information coming in. Then we have trace decay theory. Then we have something which is the cue dependent forgetting theory, which is you do not have cues, inappropriate cues, hints are missing, hints are not there, hints are not provided. Then we have something which is the encoding failure. You can go through the slide before we move to the next. These are the four causes also forgetting that we can take. As we finish with memory, the theories of memory, what causes forgetting? This is a simple example for you all to be learning the theory. Diagrammatic examples are best way of learning. So this will let you encode better. So encoding failure does not happen. Retrieval failure happens because of failures of retrieving cues. Interference, competing information interfering. Motivated forgetting, when you have a strong desire to forget something. And then there is decay theory. Now let's understand to how do we improve our techniques of memory. Like See, always remember, when I hear children saying, can we improve memory by increasing? We do not increase memory, we improve memory. You cannot stretch your memory from 10 to 20. That doesn't happen. That's if someone says that, that is something which is such an incorrect information that is being given. So let's understand some beautiful techniques to improve your memory. So there are some principles that helps us in improving our memory. First is process for meaning. You should focus on understanding a theory or content on the basis of its meaning rather than shallow processing and rote learning it without any distraction. Try and learn, try and understand it first. Make it a story like content that this happens because of this happens. Please have a cause and effect consideration. Then we have retrieval processes. This is related to retrieval practices, and this talks about trying to find out retrieval cues around your learning so that whenever next that you try to retrieve it, it gets and aids your retrieval. The next is meta memory. Meta memory, it's the awareness and knowledge of your own memory. Meta memory is the higher form of memory, knowing what I can learn, how much can I learn, for how long can I learn. So people who are able to meta memorize their concept, they know that in a span of 30 minutes, I can just do 2 pages and nothing more than that. That is being awareness and knowledge of your own memory. It helps in reflecting and monitoring memory. Next is distributed learning or practice. This is a very superior method that than the mass practice, which is discussed in the first section. So you should avoid cramming. Remember, cramming and rote learning, it is an inefficient ways of learning. Distributing practice means putting it in pointers, enumerating it in terms of the way the concept has been told. It improves your efficiency. Let's take an example. There is a huge page that you have to learn, and that talks about the theories of memory. Bracket it to 4 types, learn all the 4 types. Understand it, bracket it, and categorize it. It increases the efficiency. Why? Now you're not learning the entire page, you're learning just the 4 points and understanding. So it's distribution practice that actually aids your memory far more, and it removes that thought that I'm learning an entire page. It's about learning just 4 points. So that's a distribution wage. It increases your efficiency. Techniques that aid in retrieving the information is also known as mnemonics, which we learn further. So these are general techniques that can improve your memory, and some general things that we can explain to other people also. Now there are information and ways that aids our memory, and this method of aiding our memory is called mnemonic. The ways and methods through which we aid our memory is called mnemonics. It starts with an M. M is silent. Mnemonic. We will find it at the end of the slide. Let's move ahead. Mnemonic is what? It's a technique that aids in retrieving information, and also it greatly reduces your chances of forgetting. It greatly reduces that. So let's understand some method, and probably, hopefully, this method will also help you learn better. This method will also help you, learn your text now better, retrieve better in your examination. The first is the method of loci. Loci is loci. Loci, it's the plural of locus, which refers to position and place. This method is used for location of familiar place as cue to retrieve information. Like, for example, method of loci is, you can understand the method of location. Let's take an example. Method of location, they've shortened it as loci. It uses location as a bigger key or retrieval cue to understand it. Like, where do you put your bunch of keys? All the keys of the house, no matter it's the car key, it's the door key, it's the room key, it's the house key, where it is. There's a key bunch holder. Remember, when you're looking forward to key, where do you go first? The method of loci, the key bunch stand. So that's what is called the method of loci. Let's take an example. Your mother told you to find your shirt which needs to be cleaned and put in the washing machine. So where will you go? Will you go to your mother's wardrobe? Go to your own wardrobe. You'll go to your own wardrobe to fetch it. And as simple, you'll go to your own room. So that is called the location method, which familiarizes you with the place and becomes a cue automatically. Now let's move to the keyword method. Keyword method, it is considered appropriate for learning vocabulary for a language, because it's, one language becomes the key word for the second language. Now suppose you're learning extending vocabulary English language, you can come across a word called scowl, which stands for an angry, bad tempered, expression bird. So remember, scowl is scowl. You can say scowl. Scowl actually looks at something which is angry, bad tempered. So remember, the key word becomes scowl, angry, scary. So the way it's being pronounced, the way it's being put out becomes the key word. I'll give you a better example for this. Like for example, when we are learning in German, good morning. Remember the G remains the same. Good morning remains guten Morgen. And when we talk about good afternoon, guten Tag. So remember the G, guten, good, and good is what? Gut in German. So remember, the one word in a language becomes a keyword for the second language to be understood. Like similarly, your first paragraph becomes a learning pedestal for the second paragraph, the second becomes for the third. This is called the keyword method that we have. Now we have mnemonics using organization. What is organization? It improves your ability to retrieve information, process information properly, organizing and reorganizing things in your mind so it's better remembered. The first way of organization is chunking, which is dividing the paragraph into chunks. Like a telephone number is divided into chunks to remember it better. Don't we do that? Let's take an example. You have a telephone number of 99984844647. Remember, you remember the first chunk of 9998447 and 1919, like that. So remember, that's how you divide the context into chunks. That is chunking, dividing into smaller halves. Then we have the first letter technique. First letter technique is the color of the rainbow. Vibgyor was the first letter. Like we make acronyms. The first letter technique is very similar to acronyms. Like for the acronym that we learned for planets, my very educated mother just showed us 9 planets. My is Mercury, very Venus, educated is Earth, mother is, something which we talk about is Mars. So remember, how do we understand? My very educated mother just is Jupiter, showed is Saturn, us is Uranus, Neptune if taken as a dwarf planet, Neptune. So these are different ways that we start using first letter technique for organization of information better, and so is chunking. Chunking is dividing into different parts. Again, a best way of organization. So these are some mnemonics. We have more to go. We can just have a look and revise. Using images, we have method of loci, keyword method. Using organization, we have 2 methods, which is chunking and first letter technique, and we can go through this also. The image. The method of loci, wherever the information is placed, acronym and acrostics, which is for the first letter technique, songs and rhythms again, association is again something which is chunking. Chunking we've given of the telephone number. So that's something which we talk about in finishing memory today. What is memory? The theories of memory, theories being refuted, what is being agreed best, forgetting, what is forgetting, what causes forgetting, what is leading to forgetting, and if forgetting happens, can we make our memory better? Yes, there are techniques to make it better. We cannot increase. This is always going to be a myth to remember. We can never increase memory, expand it. We can improve it. We can help you aid it to perform better. And the way of aiding, the technique to aid in retrieving information and also reducing forgetting is called mnemonics. We've done mnemonics using images and using organization. That completes with something which is memory. Let's move to another unit that we have today that we start is something that we talk about as the motivation. This is unit 5. Unit 5 will start with the concept of motivation. After being the general foundation, let's start from the beginning. We understood what is psychology. We understood psychology involves a lot of learning. We did sensation and perception. How learning, how everything starts from senses. Senses leads to attention. We did perception. Once you attend, sense, attend, and perceive, you tend to learn. Once you learn what were the different kinds of learning, once you learn it, it gets memorized. It's memorized. It is bound to be forgotten. And what can keep it all together? Motivation. Motivation is both a psychological and physiological drive that we have within us. It's the need within an individual to fulfill their desire, to do something. That's called motivation. This is unit 5 today that we are going to start with BPC 131. Speaking of motivation, let's understand we usually find these terms called drive, arousal, goal direction, achievement, need, all of this same, but they all stand their path. They all are very different. Let's understand how does motivation takes place in an individual. Let's start through the motivational cycle that we have. The motivational cycle starts with a need which is incomplete, a need that you need to fulfill. It's a lack of state, it's a deficiency. A need is, let's take an example, hunger is a need. Speaking of hunger being the need, it's deficient. So that is driving you, that's pushing you, that's the drive. Moves to drive. Drive can be stimulated both by internal factors and external factor. Internal factors could be you very hungry. External factors that you've seen something outside and you want to eat that. That drive leads to a state of arousal for you to do something. I need to be doing to satisfy my need. That further leads to a behavior which is goal directed. I need to satisfy my hunger, so I need to find the box where my mother said I have snacks to be eaten before meals. So once the goal directed desired behavior is done, you pick up that box, you find it, and you eat it. That leads to reduction of arousal, and achievements takes place. Achievement is performance and finishing completion of that need, satisfaction of that need that we started with. Needs can be of various kind. Motivational cycles completely ends here at achievement. Remember, then there's going to be another need that could be a physiological need, it could be thirst, it could be another social need, achievement, acclaim, maybe renouncement, promotion. This is all needs that we talk about. So let's understand these words. Needs are biological state of cellular body, which is deficiency. Obviously, needs are deficient in nature. Drives are what? These are the perceived state and tension that occurs in our body when there is a deficiency. So drive is when you have an urge to do something. It's moving you ahead, like the term. And also it is some a tension which is created when there is deficiency. Simple to understand. Deficiency is need. Tension created because of that deficiency is drive. Incentives on the other end is the external or the it's the external or is from the environment that opposed to the drive, that is internal, playing acting a role in the motivating behavior. So incentives could be, if I eat a little, probably the child feels I'll be done till noon, I will not trouble my mother. So if I get a snack at 11, I will not trouble her till 2:30. So that's an incentive. What are motives? By the end, motive is something that actually drives an individual to complete a certain action, satisfy their needs, and become goal directed and achieve their kind of need that they want to. So that's a motivational cycle. Remember, this cycle goes on not only in biological but also in psychological or social needs. Drive, arousal, starting with need, drive, arousal, goal directed behavior, reduction of arousal, and achievement. That completes with the motivational cycle to understand how it all starts in our body. Now let's understand the types of motivation that we have. We have different types of motivation. So the first is the biological motives. These are motives to be understood are biological in nature. They come from the body. They come from the body to create a homeostasis, a balance in our body. So restore balance biologically. So this could be hunger, thirst, and sex. And these are all biological urge. It because hunger, many people say that many studies have shown that fasting, when a person uses too much of blood sugar or glucose, it causes hunger to them. According to Friedman and Sticker in 1976, suggested that when there is a change in the metabolic functions of the liver, the food is less and then it initiates hunger. So different ways of telling that how is hunger initiated. Then speaking of that, we talk about thirst as motivation. Thirst is actually done by antidiuretic hormone, plays an important role in regulating your water balance level. Also, a cell called osmoreceptor cells, which are nerve cells, they generate an impulse of being dehydrated. Once they generate a impulse of getting dehydrated, the body consumes, feels dehydrated, and these nerve cells then signals the brain to drink water. When thirst is caused by the loss of water from the osmoreceptor, it's called a cellular hydration thirst. So when you are losing water because of osmoreceptors, because they are shrinking and they're getting dehydrated, it's called the osmoreceptor dehydration. Thus, the loss of water from the body is causes a too much of loss of water in the body causes a concern which is called hypovolemia. We need to be taking care of that. Because of that, and this is very hot these days, we should make sure we should keep drinking a lot of fluids and keep ourselves hydrated, because once the osmoreceptor shrinks, it will create dehydration in your body way too much. Then we have something which is again a biological drive, which is called the sex drive. It depends on the physiological condition of the body. Remember, it is a biological drive. It is needed by everybody. It initiates balance, and presence of any excess hormones can also lead to deterioration of the body balance. Remember, this is also a psychological hormone, a social, I feel, a social motive, where we are told to control our urges before time. Puberty leads to beginning of the sex hormones as endorphin and gonadotrophic hormone starts away. Remember, that's the right time, but the societal forces tells us to practice it at the right time. So I feel this is both guarded by social motives, but it is essentially a sex is a biological drive which is needed for balance of your body. So let's understand the characteristics of biological motives that we have. It is internal, it is physiological in nature, it requires regulation. Remember, it's also something which is bodily like, it does not have any social command, requires balance in it so that the homeostasis is created, like body temperature, blood sugar level also needs to be maintained because of all of these. And these at times tends to be involuntary. We are unable to control it a lot of times. So that finishes with biological motives. Let's move to another kind, which is called the psychogenic or psychological motives. These are also called general motives. These are motives that do not arise either because of homeostasis balance or it's involuntary. They're innate in nature. We are born with these needs, tend to persist throughout our life, and often it's difficult to satisfy it. We keep exploring. There are times that we just keep exploring, deal with challenges and difficulties, achieve it, find more difficulties. Like, for example, achievement in life is such a psychogenic motive. You achieve one thing, you find difficulty, you want to achieve next. You find it crisis and you're not satisfied, you want to achieve the third thing. So remember that process of growth is innate. So they are innate, they are general. Remember, not all of us will have it. It is not created by any balance or imbalance conditions. And it can keep going on. We can keep exploring it time and again and time and again. So that's called something which is psychological motives. What are these psychological motives? This combines of exploration, competence, and self-actualization. Let's pick up the best first, which is called the self-actualization. This motive is ideally innate. It is a pursuit of a person to reach to its highest potential, which is capable, what they are capable of achieving. It enables a person to maximize his or her own potential. So that's called the self-actualization. Competence is the ability to master the challenges in the environment. It is also known as effectus, motivation or tendency to explore the environment and influence one's environment. So it's mastering. It's about mastering the challenges in the environment, also mastering other people, mastering people in your environment. It's competence, holding because of your ability. Then exploration. This is a motive when any person or organism wishes to move around, explore. Curiosity is something which comes with exploration. This is a drive which is once satisfies, you want to explore more. So this leads to novelty, this leads to exploration, this leads to invention. This is very active when you go to new places and events and situations. So I would say that psychogenic and psychological motives are not one of those that are present with everybody. This is not one of those motives. Now let's talk about psychogenic motives. Talking about psychogenic motives, these are more complex in nature because they're intrinsic needs, they're coming from outside, they are peers based, societal features, and family based. Achievement motivation of a type of psychogenic motive refers to the need that you want to accomplish on a task or surpass on other people. So affiliation, aggression, nurturance, dominance, and power. Remember, psychogenic is more about taking over others, falling onto other. It's about where one grows, affiliates. Affiliation is the need to make friends, be a part of social communities, social groups, cooperation, seeking cooperation, adjusting with people. Then aggression, which is fighting, forming your, belittling people, taking revenge, ridiculing, bullying. Nurturing is that ability to take care of people, nurturing people, managing people. Dominance, again, politicians have that thing of dominance, taking over people, making them understand that only if I am there, then only things will be possible in the country. Remember, that's dominance. It's also there in actors that makes you feel little and you fall for them. Today, influencers are so dominant; they're dominating our psychogenic motive, and then there is power motive, which is also your caregivers, teachers, authority, bosses are gaining power to make you do things. This is forming your power over the other people. So these are psychogenic motives, again, not present with other people. They are learned in social societies, extrinsic mostly in future. So now let's come to the last part that we have that we'll finish, which is one last theories of motivation to begin with. Every context of psychology has theories. So we have motivation also having theories. The first is evolutionary, then is the drive, then the optimal arousal. Evolutionary theory says that motivation is something which is biologically determined. It's innate characteristic. It is something which is instinctual. We are born with it. This is something which is a part of us, like reproduction, instinctual, responsible for sexual behavior. So it's biologically determined and we are born with it. So motivation is a drive that you're already having. Evolutionary as a process, McDowell and James. Drive theory tells us that motivation is the push that you get. There is a need which is incomplete and a tension which is created that drives you to complete it. So that's a tension which is creates you to push, do that behavior, complete that behavior. That's called drive. Motivation. Always remember it with drive, which is Hull, 1948. Then we come to optimal arousal. It's a very famous theory of optimal arousal, which is by Yex and Dodson in 1908. They mention that we function best when we are moderately adjusting an optimal level, not too less, not too high. So motivation happens to an optimal level of drive is needed to complete a need. Not too less lead to boredom, too high will lead to too much anxiety. So optimal level of energy, high arousal, it's important for great performance, else it lead to poor performance. This finishes with theories today. We'll continue with unit 5 yet again in the next. Thank you.